It's another great day for another great episode of Point of View. I'm Pastor Josh Barnes, and this is Justin Barnes. And this is the show where we're unashamed to look at political issues from a biblical point of view, because Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. And if he died on the cross and rose from the dead, which he did, we could prove that, then the things he said must have been true. And he said that the Bible is true. And if the Bible is true and we disagree with the Bible, then we're wrong, right? So in order to be right then about political issues, social issues, whatever the issue is, theological issues, we have to come from the point of view of the Bible. We have to stand on the truth of the Bible and start there. And so that's the whole point of the show. That's the goal. We are going to now try to apply that to the mess we're in our country because of the left and their lies, their spinning of stories, basically. It all started with, well, it didn't all start here, but recently we could trace this back in just the last several weeks to the verdict from the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. He was declared to be not guilty, which of course he was not guilty. He didn't actually murder anyone, and yet the media spun it as if he was a murderer of black people. He didn't kill anyone who was black. He was a murderer of peaceful protesters. He certainly was not. He defended himself and killed child rapists and terrible people. But then in response, the media has then tried to cover up all of the murder that has actually happened in response. We have a man, Darrell Brook, who last week plowed through a crowd of white people to try to kill as many of them as he could, because, as he says, Black lives matter. Let me show you a tweet from this man from July. This is his tweet. He shares another person's tweet, says Black Lives Matter, and he's got curse words. Not pictures as if there's curse words coming out of a mouth, and a police officer, but he has the middle finger for the police officer. This is the guy who then just on the 21st at the Christmas parade was the cause of this happening. Let me play you this video.
It was meant to be a day of joy and cheer. The annual Waukesha, Wisconsin Christmas Parade, back for the first time since the pandemic, and quickly became a scene of horror as an SUV swerved through the crowd.
Oh my gosh! There's like 7 injured that way. There's so many down there.
These images from above showing entire families, children, and parade participants desperately trying but unable to escape the vehicle's path. People terrified, many screaming for loved ones. The violent incident killing at least 5 people and injuring 48, 18 children hospitalized, 6 in critical condition.
There were just so many bodies in the road, and then I saw them start to pick them up, and they were little kids.
Some of those in critical condition have now passed. We have the latest numbers are 6 dead, at least one of those a child. He plowed right through a elderly woman's dance crew and through a band, as you saw right there in those pictures and those videos. This is what he posted in June of this year. This is Darrell Brook, the guy who was driving the car, who drove through all those people. He posted this: learned and taught behavior. So when we start back knocking white people, TF out. I wanna hear it. The old white people too. Knock them TF. You know what that stands for? Out. Period. the old white people too. That's exactly what he did. He followed through on what he said he wanted to do, is kill white people. And he did so because the media riled him up. This is not an excuse on his account, but it is an accusation laid against the media and the left, who have riled him up. And yet they've convinced people like Darrell that systemic racism exists in our country. And yet, Justin, isn't these last few weeks like proof that systemic racism doesn't exist in our country? As a matter of fact, if anything, reverse systemic racism exists in the media.
I think that this past couple of weeks is proof that systemic racism does exist. Because there's no such thing as reverse racism. There's racism, period. Racism isn't just white against black. It's any race against any other race, if you want to use the term race, which whole different conversation. But this is absolutely proof that there is a systemic racism of sorts. Here's your proof. Darrell Brooks tried to run over his girl, or actually I think did run over his girlfriend with his car in a gas station.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. This man was released on like $1,000 bail. And Kyle Rittenhouse had to face charges he never should have faced. And it was evident from the opening statement of the prosecution that these charges never should have been faced. And yet 6 people are dead and many more run over by a car because the white person didn't get found guilty on charges he never should have faced to begin with. Yeah, I'd say there's some systemic racism. Because when you have in Baltimore that gangs can just have a shootout, or excuse me, Chicago, I believe, that gangs can just have a shootout in the middle of the day, kill people, I think 70 rounds discharged, and no charges are brought because of mutual combat from the police when there was a shooting in the middle of a street. And yet Kyle Rittenhouse has to face charges. Yes, there is systemic racism, but no, it is not against black people. And until we're allowed to say that, until you're allowed to speak the truth, until people stop being so scared of being politically correct and being silenced and all of this other stuff, you're going to keep having this. Because this person has been convinced by the media and by the government that white cops are out just hunting down black people, even though I believe the statistic is that cops are 18 times more likely to be killed by a black man than vice versa. Then the media, the government, they're indoctrinating these people, and what you get what you pay for. Of course this is going to happen. People need to stop treating people with kid gloves anymore. This needs to end. Just because of your skin color doesn't mean you should get one treatment or the other. And when you pretend like the world is on fire and everything is against black people, this is going to happen. You are going to get this. And it's almost like that's the point. And it's evil and it's wicked.
Yeah, I wonder, I think back to January 6th, when the left all pointed fingers at Donald Trump, saying because he claimed that the election was stolen, he is indirectly, at least, responsible for people storming the Capitol angry about the election being stolen. Although there's a lot more to that story, and that was instigated probably by people who weren't even on the side of the MAGA people. But that's a side note. The point is, they pointed fingers at Donald Trump because they said that he gave people a reason to think that they should storm the Capitol. Well, if that's the case, what do you think the media's responsibility is for riling people up, saying that every white person hates you? That's what critical race theory teaches. Every white person hates every black person, even if they don't want to hate every black person. They do. They can't help it. They absolutely are racist, period. Therefore, black people have every right to kill whoever they want. Now, what I think is interesting is that CNN posted this. Go ahead.
Real quick, you bring up Donald Trump, and I think there's something that kind of I need to repent of here, and I think a lot of people need to apologize to Donald Trump for, because even the most hardcore conservatives, the most people like Ben Shapiro and others, went after Trump relentlessly when he called the media the enemy of the people. He was right.
Yeah.
He was absolutely right. And we are seeing that before our eyes. The media is burning the country to the ground and fundamentally changing it. And in cahoots now with a very left-leaning, with a very progressive left, liberal, whatever you want to call it, White House, Senate, Congress, they are absolutely an enemy of the people.
An unbiased and fair media, the idea of free media is not the enemy of the people. But the media we have today absolutely is. And here's a case in point, Justin. I'm glad you said that before I showed this, because it really underscores what CNN posted yesterday. Here's the tweet. Waukesha will hold a moment of silence today, marking 1 week since a car drove through a city Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring scores of others. Waukesha, and I'm reading the bottom, but it's actually just repeating. So who killed 6 people and injured scores of others? Well, it was a car. A car drove through the city Christmas parade and killed these people. Not a Black Lives Matter activist, not someone who is angry because CNN riled them up about false claims of prejudice against black people that permeates throughout every white person in the country. No. That's not who killed these people. It was a car. A car killed them. Notice they did not say that a gun killed anybody in Kenosha when Kyle Rittenhouse pulled the trigger, because he just happened to be white. But it was a car that killed people in Waukesha. But didn't we just have a case just last week where we had the final verdict on the case? What was the name of that man who was killed?
Ahmaud Arbery.
Ahmaud. He was unjustly killed by a band of white thugs. I don't care what you want to say. They were absolute dirty pieces of trash who decided it was their responsibility to arrest this dude just because he was running in their neighborhood and was black. This is racism, no doubt about it. They tried to arrest him, not being police officers, just random citizens. They decided to arrest Ahmed. When he ran from them, they opened fire and killed him for resisting the arrest of a private citizen with no grounds. And this is a great example of racism in this country. Like, okay, racism against black people, you're looking for it. Here it is, CNN. Cover it. Guess what CNN did? Ignored it almost entirely because it doesn't fit their narrative. They were arrested, they were tried, they were convicted, they're going away forever, or maybe I suppose they might face the death penalty. I'm not sure if sentencing has happened yet, but they were found guilty. And this is actually kind of proof that systemic racism doesn't exist in our country, isn't it? Or at least not the way that CNN wants to say. Though I think you make a fair point that the reason CNN misses this is because they want racism, because ultimately they are racist. They want to pit a divide between the races.
Right, so there's a couple different things to touch on there. Number one, I think the recounting of what happened there might be a little bit, if you followed the Ahmaud Arbery case, I think some of the details are a little, at least missing there, because the defense's claim was that, and I believe they at least provided some evidence that there was break-ins on a construction zone nearby, and they believed Arbery fit the description that they had heard. Doesn't mean they should have chased him down with a shotgun. And I think from what I could tell, the correct verdict was reached, but I don't know that it was as cut and dry racism as people made it out to be. It might have been. I'm not defending the people. I think, again, that they found the right verdict, and people guilty of murder, biblical law, should get the death penalty. So don't think I'm defending them. I just don't think that maybe that was portrayed 100% as I perceived.
Well, it never is portrayed exactly the way it really is. It's always going to be portrayed.
But here's the thing. There's no controversy about this case. At least not in large part. There might be some skinheads or whatever, some people on the far right who are upset about the verdict on that one. But overall, there's not a lot of controversy here. Therefore, the media doesn't care about it. It is not useful to them. It's not going to get them clicks. It's not going to stir up more unrest. This is a case where a black guy was shot unjustifiably, and white people that did it are going to go to jail for it. No controversy. And people on the right and people on the left agree they should go to jail for it. There's nothing for the media to do here. But back to what you were saying about headlines, it reminded me, even during the Rittenhouse trial, if you were to Google Kyle Rittenhouse or Rittenhouse verdict or something like that, one of the headlines that would pop up, I forget which site it was on, but you would see headlines like this. Kenosha shooter on trial for murder of 2 people and shooting of another. That would be the headline. And it would be the mugshot of Kyle Rittenhouse. Compare that to the picture you showed of some candles and whatever, and the car hit some people. Forget about the person. If you don't believe in media bias, look at that. I should have told you before the show to pull up the headline, because I'm sure you can still find it. The headline where it's Kenosha shooter, picture of Kyle's mugshot. Kenosha shooter faces charges of murder. Da, 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 da. If you don't think that they're trying to control you, you're not paying attention. If you still believe there's an unbiased... By the way, Fox News isn't unbiased either. Red American Media isn't unbiased. Everybody has their biases. But who's willing to acknowledge it and who's willing to show their work? Because we're willing to walk you through things and show our work and say, okay, prove us wrong. Or as Steven Crowder would say, change my mind.
Yeah. It's also interesting, and this is one of the reasons why I thought this was important to bring up. It's important to bring up, but as we look at issues from the biblical worldview, we want look, more than 50% of the country, all right, more than 50% of the country claim to be Christians. Now, I don't know that we could say that more than 50% of the country are Christians. They would just say, yeah, I'm a Christian if you ask them. But nowhere near that number of people in this country actually use a biblical worldview when approaching issues like this. It's what did CNN say? What did Fox News say? What did my favorite talking head say? Nobody really cares about the scripture and about actually diving into these things. We've talked about this before. The Bible makes it very clear that you're an absolute fool if you answer a matter, if you come to a conclusion about something without first diving in and finding out the actual facts, without not just hearsay, actual facts. You're a fool. The Bible talks very clearly about racism being evil and wicked. But there's another thing that I found in Darrell Brook's Facebook page here that I thought was interesting. This is you can't really read the whole thing. You can check it out. I actually found this on just doing a Google search about some of the things he said. But in here, he actually talks about, he shared this post that basically glorifies Hitler because Hitler understood that the real Jews were black people and that that Hitler was actually trying to help God by destroying America because America was run by white Jews and was enslaving black Jews. It's convoluted and it's completely nonsensical. It's black Hebrew Israelitish. But it's what I wanted to bring this out for is because it shows how wrong theology makes a huge difference in all of your conclusions about everything else. We have even right now trying to get nominated for a position in the cabinet, a woman who says in Biden's cabinet, a woman who says, "Yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm kind of upset about a lot of churches who aren't open and affirming and accepting of other people." And you can see why she's a leftist, because she's a Christian, but she doesn't have a Christian foundation. She doesn't have the biblical worldview. But I've been wanting to kind of do a whole episode on the Black Hebrew Israelites for a long time. Are you familiar with what they teach, Justin?
I'm familiar. I mean, I've heard a lot of interviews with like former Black Hebrew Israelite people. I've heard interviews with people who have dedicated their main outreaches to Black Hebrew Israelites, and it's not exactly the most scholarly position that could be taken out there. I mean, you've watched the debates that Dr. James White did with one of I think it's Elder Rakah of the Black Hebrew Israelites. Nothing that they say stands up to any sort of scrutiny, but I am familiar with it. And to your point, by the way, of course your theology affects this kind of stuff. I mean, look at 9/11.
Yeah.
9/11 was a theological problem. If I fly this plane into those towers, Allah will send me to heaven, or Muslim heaven, because in Islam, one way to guarantee you go to heaven is die in combat for Allah, basically. So there's your theology right there. What you're going to find is that a culture becomes what it worships. It becomes like what it worships. When Christianity was the main thrust of America, not perfectly, but we were Christ-like. We had a basic understanding of the things of a biblical worldview in general. But now that we worship something different, some people worshiping money, some people worshiping sexuality, some people worshiping the people, we're becoming like what we worship. And any culture that turns away from worship of God to a different God, whatever that God may be, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a nightmare. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Now, an atheist might say that's why we need no theology. We need to not believe in God because it causes wars. But when you have atheism, you still have belief. You just believe in yourself. You really turn into a humanist. You look inwardly for your answers. Where do you get your morals from? Well, from my own standards, right? You exalt other things into God's place, and ultimately you're going to fall into the same and even a worse trap than those who have bad theology about God. So atheism is the worst theology.
And I'll put it to you this way. I will stack up the death count from even the bad things that people have done in the name of Christianity, like the Inquisition and the Crusades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'll stack that up any day against Stalin, against Hitler, people who were operating on the atheist worldview. I'll stack that up against how many people is it? 160 or 180,000 abortions worldwide a year, a rejection of the Christian worldview. You want to compare death counts of which worldview basically produces the most good in humanity? It's not even a contest. If it was a fight, they would stop it because you're getting beat down. So atheism has no leg to stand on here if we want to talk about human flourishing. Stalin, atheist, hundreds of millions of people dead.
Yeah.
Not even close.
And now we can add 48 people injured, over 50 people altogether between those injured, those killed, to the stack, to the death count of or to the injured count of those hurt by the media and by the cultural revolution that's going on in our country. This is why when we lost the culture war, which we've lost it. We're still fighting, but we're on the losing side at the moment. We lost everything. We gave up our media. I mean, who is still watching CNN? Why are they getting any viewers at all? Why are people still buying into this? Why are people still accepting this? And an alarming number of people. I mean, we have a new study recently that came out. 25% of young people identify as homosexual or LGBT or bisexual.
I think it was higher than that.
Was it even high? Because
yeah.
see, the
You're
number
talking about the Barna survey.
Yeah, is it in the 30s?
Yeah, I believe that was it. I think it was in the 30s.
Yeah, we've lost. I mean, when I was growing up, it was, it was such a tiny, and it was less than 1% of people, it was just this minor thing, but it's been pushed on us. We've accepted it. We've said, no big deal. I'll still watch the programs. I'll still listen. I'll still support the news. I'll still do that, even though I disagree with this one thing. And now it's just gone. We've lost the next generation. And unless we can get information like we try to give out on this show out there to regain and recapture our youth, help them understand that critical race theory, wrong, incorrect, unbiblical, that homosexuality, wrong, incorrect, unbiblical, abortion, wicked, evil, murder, unless we can get across these principles to young people through the teachings of Scripture, there's really no hope for our country as far as I can see.
Christ or chaos.
Yeah.
That's your options. Christ or chaos. I mean, take your pick. Let me ask you this. Was America a better, more united, more fulfilled, more happy country 100 years ago when Christianity was more popular, or now? Take your pick.
100 years ago.
Because I tell you what, once you had the feminist movement, which a lot of people think was great, no, it was awful. And it's borne the results. It was the founders of that movement themselves were targeting biblical Christianity as this is our enemy. Ever since then, ever since you have this, Roe versus Wade, ever since you have all these liberation movements, the sexual liberation movement, all of that, it is chaos upon chaos upon chaos. It is evil and death and misery and destruction. Women are far less happy these days than they were before the feminist movement. There is no question that God, when he turns a people over to their wickedness, like Romans 1 talks about, it is not that they go ahead and suddenly find fulfillment in their desires because God finally gave the society over to it. No, they eat themselves alive. They destroy themselves. And that's what's happening in our country. One of the only hopes we have, I mean, obviously God can do what he pleases, so there is hope in Christ, of course. But from just thinking on a rational, down-to-earth perspective here, one of the biggest hopes we have is that stupid is not a winning strategy. And hopefully it's one that will eat itself to death, and then we can get back to being normal and back to having a brain when we function in society again.
Yeah. I think the older population of our country, I think if you go 40s or 50s and up, I think you have a much more wisdom. You have people who are seeing this, who are spotting this out. But it's going to take those people not just seeing it, but teaching it to the other generations, to teach it to their kids or their grandkids, or else, we're in trouble. It doesn't really matter who we elect as president. We're still in trouble. Although we need a new president. That's a side note. That's all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you for joining us. If you're stressed out about all this stuff, you know what will help on MyPillow. Go to MyPillow.com. Use the promo code RAM. You'll support the show. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time right here on Point of View.